Roseanne, welcome back.
Thank you so much. This is exciting. I love this topic.
To let our viewers know that today we are discussing all about sugars and refined sugars. This is a topic that I get many questions about. People are very confused as to whether to include sugars and carbohydrates in their diet and what is okay and what should we eat less of. Is this something that you ever come across?
For me, it's very confusing to differentiate between carbohydrates that we spoke about earlier that become sugars and which are the sugars that are good for me to include.
Okay, so let me do my best today to put you at ease with how to include carbohydrates and sugars in the diet, what to include more of and what to include less of.
Perfect.
So, as human beings, we require glucose in our blood in order to live a normal, healthy life. In particular, our brain and our kidneys predominantly uses glucose, which is the byproduct of carbohydrate digestion, as the main fuel and the main resource in order to be able for us to think and to live a healthy life. However, if we have too much, then obviously this leads to diseases, and it also leads to a lot of inflammation in the body. So when we focus on carbohydrates, the type of foods we are looking at, as we discussed previously, are more the whole grain products. We're looking for foods that are as close to their most natural form as possible, not too processed, because then our body works that little bit harder in order to be able to digest them, and this allows for us to absorb the other nutrients from the food that we wouldn't be getting if we were eating a more processed product. Okay, so examples of carbohydrates which naturally have glucose in them, which we need, or sugars, which is the more commonly accepted term, are your oats and bread and pasta and potatoes. There are a lot of starchy vegetables that fall into this category as well. Things like pumpkin, butternut, sweet potato. I'm also thinking of things like green beans and corn and peas. So even though some of these may also be legumes, there are also very high portions of carbohydrates, but they're healthy.
Okay. But from understanding that, it seems like actual sugar, because we're getting the sugar from elsewhere, is where we need to be more limited on sweet.
Okay, so it's the added sugars to our diet that we need to pay attention to. These are the ones that cause the biggest problem with disease risk and with illness. When we are eating and too much of refined sugars, which come in adding actual teaspoons of sugar, whether it's white or brown, onto foods, whether it's coconut sugar or cane sugar, it all has an impact on our final blood sugar level. And what this does is that it increases inflammation in the body. Our body naturally, as I said, needs sugar, but the way that our body processes this is by releasing a hormone called insulin. I'm sure you've heard of that, okay, into the body in order to maintain our blood sugar or our blood glucose level at the right level for health. When we overconsume even the healthy carbohydrates, when we are eating products or adding foods in which have too much sugars, be they whole food sugars or refined sugars, this forces our body to increase insulin substantially. And there is a ripple effect from this that continues over time that leads to chronic disease and illness.
So if I'm going to choose a fruit as a natural sugar, how many fruits can I have in a day?
A very good question. So everybody needs slightly different amounts, and the general guidelines are to include about 3 fruits a day, lots more vegetables as well. And when you are eating a fruit, you don't want to have more than 1 or 2 portions at a time to ensure that you are not increasing your blood sugar level too high. So for example here, I'm going to make a delicious smoothie for you.
I'm so happy for that.
And what I'm going to show you is, for example here, is about 5 medium-sized strawberries. Okay, we're going to add that into there. I've chopped up a banana here. So I haven't chopped up the whole one. Here again, a smaller banana is ideal, or about 2/3 of a normal sized banana. And that is about 1 cup of fruit together, which is the maximum amount of fruit that you should be eating all at once. Okay? We are now going to add some extras in. Okay? A little bit of water. You can choose to add milk or not, depending on whether you prefer to have it a dairy option or not. This is actually an almond milk, so it's more of a vegan choice. It's an unsweetened almond milk, so there's no added sugar to that as well. We add a little bit of that in. Okay. Then, in order to keep up with our previous discussion about adding some healthy fats, I'm going to include some unsweetened peanut butter. So about a teaspoon of that. Here again, we don't want to overdo the fats either. Then I'm going to add my very, very healthy omega-3 fatty acids in the form of chia seeds. Again, just 1 teaspoon. And finally, I'm going to put some ice in. And we're now going to blend it all together.
So this is the perfect amount for one person, for one serving.
Correct. Look, if you are diabetic or if you have any blood sugar concerns, it would be important maybe to have half of this instead of the whole amount. But let's have a look. Right. Are you ready? This is going to make a bit of noise. Right, let's have a look. Okay, so ideally we want it a little bit more thick than this, and perhaps I can get a glass in order to empty that out for you. Okay, so I'm going to let you try this. Now we haven't added any added sugars in. This is purely the fruit sugar. How does that taste to you?
It tastes good to me, but I like it sweeter.
You like it sweeter, okay. So this is many people's complaints, and there are some fruits that are a little bit sweeter than others. You could potentially then add something like mango in if you wanted a bit sweeter. It's interesting though, when you start reducing sugars and added sugars in your diet, your body gets used to a more natural sense of sugar that is not as sweet. And this perhaps is also a sign, not that I'm saying you're not healthy, but a sign of us being so much more used to an overly sweet taste. And one of the keys with eating in a more healthy way is to get used to a true natural taste of sugar that is not too sweet.
So that's a great tip. It means that if every day I have a portion of a smoothie in the morning, my body will acclimatize to wanting that extra sweetness.
Absolutely. When we remove a lot of these refined sugars that are added sugars to the diet, and they get used to the taste and flavor of natural sugars, your sense of sweetness, your taste of sweetness adjusts accordingly. So it's definitely well worth a try.
That's amazing. Justine, is this as a snack in between, or it's considered a meal?
Okay, so this would definitely be more of a snack. However, there are some people who find it a bit more difficult to eat first thing in the morning, and for them this would be a great option. What I would perhaps encourage is adding a oats or something like that together with it in order to give better energy going forward for the day.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so that is one example. The last thing I want to discuss with you, which I think is very important, is understanding how to read food labels. Because very often we are not aware when we buy and purchase foods what ingredients there are in it. And when we are able to identify this, then we can make a truly informed decision based on what we want to be including and what we would rather avoid. When we're looking at the food label of a product, which is in general going to be more of a processed product, we have a list of different items on the nutrition label. You'll see calories listed, you'll see fats listed, protein, carbohydrate, a whole list. What I want to focus on with you today is what it says according to carbohydrates and sugars. So if you have a look at this label, it has got broken down all the different ingredients, and I want you to focus on what the total carbohydrate content is, which here it says that per serving, which according to this is a 240 ml serving, it has 27 grams of carbohydrate. That means if you have that serving size, which is just under a cup, you are going to get as much as 27 grams of carbohydrate. However, what that means further broken down is that when we look at the total sugars, there are 25 grams of total sugar in the product, but it further breaks it down and says that this includes added sugars of 23 grams.
So that's bad, right?
So when it says added sugar, this is refined sugars on top of what happens to be natural. You want to try and choose a product that has mainly natural carbohydrates in it with very little added sugar to the product. Okay, that's one example. Another way to look at a food label, if perhaps it doesn't have this all broken down correctly, is the list of ingredients. So the manufacturers, by law, are meant to include in the list of ingredients in order of the largest concentration to the smallest concentration in the product of what the ingredients are. So the main item in a product will be listed first, and the smallest component will be listed last.
Okay, good to know.
How do you check to see whether there is a high sugar content? Typically, if it is listed in one of the first 3 ingredients, it is very high in sugar. Unless there are only 3 ingredients and you can see according to the nutrition label that it's a small amount, then you can play around with that.
Right.
But in general, if there are these ingredients listed in highest proportions and sugar is one of them, you know this is something to stay away from. So what we are looking for from a health point of view is including your whole grain carbohydrates, your more whole foods when it comes to starches, fruits, vegetables, which all contribute to your sugars that your body needs. Legumes, which we've discussed before, also fall into that category. And what we're trying to move away from is adding refined sugars into our diets. For example, adding sugar into tea and coffee. I'm not sure how much you use, but one thing that I try, and it's still in my clients, is that if they're adding 2 or 3 teaspoons of sugar into tea or coffee, that they just reduce it by 1 teaspoon to start. And then another 1 teaspoon as they get used to that slightly lower taste of sweetness. Until eventually, hopefully, they can reduce it altogether and eliminate it and actually enjoy the taste of the coffee or the tea without that added sweetness.
So on the food label, again, just to go over it for myself, the most important thing is to look at the total carbohydrates and the added sugars and of course the rest of the ingredients that are in there. But that's typically what we're looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Okay, I can remember that, important.
Okay, good. I hope that gives you some practical advice and you're able to implement that. What we are looking for when it comes to reducing refined sugars is decreasing the inflammation that we're seeing, as we've discussed before, reducing chronic illness, reducing chronic diseases that all stem from us overeating these kind of products. One last thing, and I know you've mentioned it and asked me before in previous talks, it's all about portion size. Even healthy foods in excess can put stress and strain on the body, so it's important to understand how much is right for you and your body, and that really then helps you to balance and moderate your health the best way possible.
Justine, this is so valuable. I really, really thank you.
It's my pleasure.
And I'm going to put it into good use.
Wonderful.
And appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.